And we're hearing that nobody's happy at this point. Senator, Democrats in the House, certain Republicans in the Senate. Nobody likes the $1.8 trillion, which is not that far from 2.3, 2.4. It seems like there's more than meets the eye going on here from both sides and not wanting to move ahead with this.
Well, Joe, that's a good, I think, assessment. Nobody's happy. Sometimes when nobody's happy, that's the best deal you can get, because when all or nothing is your negotiating position at the beginning, it's one thing. But when your last negotiating position is all or nothing, you generally end up with nothing. And that's true in pretty much every kind of negotiation, but certainly true in Washington, D.C. So you're right, $1.8 trillion isn't that far from $2.3 trillion, but it's also not far from $1.2 trillion. Republicans scoff at the price tag, understandably. We've driven up an awful lot of debt. Listen to your previous segment. I have to say, Joe, I agree more with you than your guest. The idea of increased taxes and regulations frightens the heck out of me, and I think we need to avoid that, but we also need to avoid driving up this debt any further unnecessarily. And that's why a more targeted approach, as Republicans have proposed, I think is the better way to go. There are a lot of things we can agree on. Let's focus on those things, like airline support, like small business support. How about including restaurants and the travel industry in the next round? They were largely left out of the last round. And we need to build a bridge to the other side of this, to this economic slump.
So that's what Republicans would want, but that's different than what the Democrats would want. Do you think there's a common ground on an airline bill or something small, Senator?
Yeah, I think there's a common ground. The question is whether it's tenable for one side or the other to accept the fact that the other side might win something. One of the things that I have always found frustrating in Washington is when people oppose something for what's not in it. That's why I think we should find that common ground you're talking about, whether it's an extension and expansion of PPP, some help for airline industry, maybe even an extension of unemployment and insurance benefits at a more modest number than what Speaker Pelosi is providing. But we shouldn't let nothing be the conclusion just because you didn't get everything. The other problem, Joe, is there is a lot of monkey business, if you will, going on the policy side. Things like prohibiting states from requiring identification to get a ballot, for example, or allowing ballot harvesting nationwide, or stimulus checks for illegal immigrants. Those things are going to make it impossible for us to get to a deal. Let's focus on the things that we know the vast majority of people want. And we might not get 10 or 20 Republicans, and we might lose 10 Democrats, but we got to find the big, broad middle and come to a conclusion that I think the country's crying out for.
I think that's what Kudlow was saying, that if the Dems will compromise it, you'd get enough Republicans at that point, and that wouldn't be the stumbling block. What do you really think the chances are that that's going to happen, in that you talk about somebody getting a win, and there's a whole group of, we have a lot of, when we do have Republicans on, they all say that Speaker Pelosi is loath to agree to anything prior to the election.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I think all or nothing's easy if you're willing to settle for nothing. I think in her case, she probably prefers nothing, because the political calculation is Democrats benefit from nothing. Then they can blame Donald Trump, and they can blame Senate Republicans, and maybe somehow she can even blame House Republicans, although I don't know how. This is why I think the reality is that a deal isn't going to be struck until after the election. Once that election pressure valve is released, then I think there's all kinds of opportunity to get something done. I think people ought to be optimistic about that, but that's not really the kind of message we ought to be sending as lawmakers.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.